Chapter 6. A rookie was guarding the door to Lola Star's apartment. Eve pegged him as such because he barely looked old enough to order a beer. His uniform looked as if it had just been lifted from the supply rack, and from the faint green cast of his skin, a few months of working this neighborhood, and a cop stopped needing to puke at the sight of a corpse. Kimmy heads, the street LCs, and just plain badasses like to wail on each other along these nasty blocks as much for entertainment as for business profits. From the smell that had greeted her outside, someone had died out there recently, or the recycle trucks hadn't been through in the last week. Officer, she paused, flashed her badge. He'd gone on alert the moment she'd stepped out of the pitiful excuse for an elevator. Instinct warned her, rightly enough, that without the quick ID, she'd have been treated to a stun from the weapon his shaky hand was gripping. Sir, his eyes were spooked and unwilling to settle on one spot. Give me the status. Sir, he said again, and took a long unsteady breath. The landlord flagged down my unit, said there was a dead woman in the apartment. And is there? Her gaze flicked down to the name pinned over his breast pocket. Officer Prosky? Yes, sir, she's. He swallowed, hard, and Eve could see the horror flit over his face again. And how did you determine the subject is terminated, Prosky? You take her pulse. A flush, no healthier than the green hue, tinted his cheeks. No, sir. I followed procedure, preserved crime scene, notified headquarters. Visual confirmation of termination. The scene is uncorrupted. The landlord went in. All of this she could learn later, but she could see that he was studying as she forced him to go over the steps. No, sir, he says not. After a complaint by one of the victim's clients who had an appointment for 9 p.m., the landlord checked the apartment. He unlocked the door and saw her. It's only one room, Lieutenant Dallas, and Shazza, you see her as soon as you opened the door. Following the discovery, the landlord, in a state of panic, went down to the street and flagged down my patrol unit. I immediately accompanied him back to the scene, made visual confirmation of suspicious death, and reported in. Have you left your post, officer? However briefly, his eyes settled finally, met hers. No, sir, Lieutenant. I thought I'd have to, for a minute. It's my first, and I had some trouble maintaining. Looks like you maintained fine to me, Prosky. Out of the crime bag she'd brought up with her, she took out the protective spray. Use it. Make the calls to forensics and me. The room needs to be swept, and she'll need to be bagged and tagged. Yes, sir. Should I remain on post until the first team gets here? Then you can report in. She finished coating her boots, glanced up at him. You married, Prosky? She asked as she snapped her recorder to her shirt. No, sir. Sort of engaged though. After you report in, go find your lady. The ones who go for the liquor don't last as long as the ones who have a nice warm body to lose it in. Where do I find the landlord? She asked and turned the knob on the unsecured door. He's down in 1A. Then tell him to stay put. I'll take his statement when I'm done here. She stepped inside, closed the door. Eve, no longer a rookie, didn't feel her stomach revolt at the sight of the body, the torn flesh, or the blood-splattered child's toys. But her heart ached. Then came the anger, a sharp red spear of it when she spotted the antique weapon cradled in the arms of a teddy bear. She was just a kid. It was 7 a.m. Eve hadn't been home. She'd caught 1 hour's rough and restless sleep at her office desk between computer searches and reports. Without a Code 5 attached to Lola Star, Eve was free to access the databanks of the International Resource Center on Criminal Activity. So far, work had come up empty on matches. Now, pale with fatigue, jittery with the false energy of false caffeine, she faced Feeney. She was a pro, Dallas. Her fucking license was barely 3 months old. There were dolls on her bed. There was Kool-Aid in her kitchen. She couldn't get past hide all those silly, girlish things she'd had to paw through while the victim's pitiful body lay on the cheap, fussy pillows and dolls. Enraged, Eve slapped one of the official photos onto her desk. She looks like she should have been leading cheers at the high school. Instead, she's running tricks and collecting pictures of fancy apartments and fancier clothes. You figure she knew what she was getting into? I don't figure she thought she'd end up dead, Feeney said evenly. You want to debate the sex codes, Dallas? Number. Wearily, she looked down at her hard copy again. No, but it bums me, Feeney, a kid like this. You know better than that. Dallas. Yeah, I know better. She forced herself to snap back. Autopsy should be in this morning, but my prelim puts her dead for 24 hours minimum at discovery. You've identified the weapon? SIG 210 real Rolls-Royce of handguns, about 1980. Swiss import. Silenced. Those old-timey silencers were only good for a couple, 3 shots. He'd have needed it because the victim's place wasn't soundproofed like DeBlas's. And he didn't phone it in, which tells me he didn't want her found as quickly. Had to get himself someplace else, she mused. Thoughtful, she picked up a small square of paper, officially sealed, 2 of 6. 1 a week, she said softly. Jesus Christ, Feeney. He isn't giving us much time. I'm running her logs, trick book. She had a new client scheduled, 8 p.m., night before last. If your prelim checks, he's our guy. Feeney smiled thinly. John Smith. That's older than the murder weapon. She rubbed her hands hard over her face. Rick is bound to spit our boy out from that tag. They're still running data, Feeney muttered. He was protective, even sentimental about the Ricka. They're not going to find squat. We got us a time traveler, Feeney. He snorted. Yeah, a real Jules Verne. We've got a 20th century crime, she said through her hands. The weapons, the excessive violence, the hand-printed note left on scene. So maybe our killer is some sort of historian, or buff anyway. Somebody who wishes things were what they used to be. Lots of people think things would be better some other way. That's why the world's lousy with theme parks. Thinking. She dropped her hands. Rika isn't going to help us get into this guy's head. It still takes a human mind to play that game. What's he doing, Feeney? Why is he doing it? He's killing LCs. Hookers have always been easy targets. Back to Jack the Ripper, right? It's a vulnerable job, even now with all the screening. We still get clients knocking LCs around, killing them. Doesn't happen much, Feeney mused. Sometimes with the S&M trade you get a party that gets too enthusiastic. Most LCs are safer than teachers. They still run a risk, the oldest profession with the oldest crime. But things have changed, some things. People don't kill with guns as a rule anymore. Too expensive, too hard to come by. Sex isn't the strong motivator it used to be, too cheap, too easy to come by. We have different methods of investigation, and a whole new batch of motives. When you brush all that away, the one fact is that people still terminate people. Keep digging, Feeney. I've got people to talk to. What you need some sleep, kid. Let him sleep, Eve muttered. Let that bastard sleep. Steeling herself, she turned to her telelink. It was time to contact the victim's parents. By the time Eve walked into the sumptuous foyer of Rourke's Midtown office, she'd been up for more than 32 hours. She'd gotten through the misery of having to tell 2 shocked, weeping parents that their only daughter was dead. She'd stared at her monitor until the data swam in front of her eyes. Her follow-up interview with Lola's landlord had been its own adventure. Since the man had had time to recover, he'd spent 30 minutes whining about the unpleasant publicity and the possibility of a drop-off in Randall's. So much, Eve thought, for human empathy. Rourke Industries, New York, was very much what she'd expected. Slick, shiny, sleek, the building itself spread 150 stories into the Manhattan sky. It was an ebony lance, glossy as whetstone, ringed by transport tubes and diamond-bright skyways. No tacky glitter grills on this corner, she mused. No street hawkers with their hot pocket PCs dodging security on their colorful airboards. Out-of-doors vending was off-limits on this bite of Fifth. The zoning made things quieter, if a little less adventuresome. Inside, the main lobby took up a full city block, boasting 3 Tony restaurants, a high-priced boutique, a handful of specialty shops, and a small theater that played art films. The white floor tiles were a full yard square and gleamed like the moon. Clear glass elevators zipped busily up and down, people glides zigzagged left and right, while disembodied voices guided visitors to various points of interest or, if there was business to be conducted, the proper office. For those who wanted to wander about on their own, there were more than a dozen moving maps. Eve marched to a monitor and was politely offered assistance. Rourke, she said, annoyed that his name hadn't been listed on the main directory. I'm sorry. The computer's voice was that overly mannered tone that was meant to be soothing, and instead grated on Eve's already raw nerves. I'm not at liberty to access that information. Rourke, Eve repeated, holding up her badge for the computer to scan. She waited impatiently as the computer hummed, undoubtedly checking and verifying her ID, notifying the man himself. "Please proceed to the East Wing, Lieutenant Dallas. You will be met." Right. Eve turned down a corridor, past a marble run that held a forest of snowy white impatiens. "Lieutenant." A woman in a killer red suit and hair as white as the impatiens smiled coolly. "Come with me, please." The woman slipped a thin security card into a slot, laid her palm against a sheet of black glass for a handprint. The wall slid open, revealing a private elevator. Eve stepped inside with her, and was unsurprised when her escort requested the top floor. Eve had been certain Rourke would be satisfied with nothing but the top. Her guide was silent on the ride up and exuded a discreet whiff of sensible scent that matched her sensible shoes and neat, sleek coif. Eve secretly admired women who put themselves together, top to toe, with such seeming effortlessness. Faced with such quiet magnificence, she tugged self-consciously at her worn leather jacket and wondered if it was time she actually spent money on a haircut rather than hacking away at it herself. Before she could decide on such earth-shattering matters, the doors whooshed open into a silent, white-carpeted foyer the size of a small home. There were lush green plants, real plants, ficus, balm, what appeared to be a dogwood flowering off-season. There was a sharp spicy scent from a bank of dianthus, blooming in shades of rose and vivid purple. The garden surrounded a comfortable waiting area of mauve sofas and glossy wood tables, lamps that were surely solid brass with jeweled-colored shades. In the center of this was a circular workstation, equipped as efficiently as a cockpit with monitors and keyboards, gauges and telelinks. 2 men and a woman worked at it busily, with a seamless ballet of competence and motion. She was led past them into a glass-sided breezeway. A peek down, and she could see Manhattan. There was music piped in she didn't recognize as Mozart. For Eve, music began sometime after her 10th birthday. The woman in the killer suit paused again, flashed her cool, perfect smile, then spoke into a hidden speaker. "Lieutenant Dallas, sir." "Sent her in, Caro." "Thank you." Again Caro pressed her palm to a slick black glass. "Go right in, Lieutenant," she invited as a panel slid open. "Thanks." Out of curiosity, Eve watched her walk away, wondering how anyone could stride so gracefully on 3-inch heels. She walked into Rourke's office. It was, as she expected, as impressive as the rest of his New York headquarters. Despite the soaring, 3-sided view of New York, the lofty ceiling with its pinprick lights, the vibrant tones of topaz and emerald in the thickly cushioned furnishings, it was the man behind the ebony slab desk that dominated. What in hell was it about him? Eve thought again as Rourke rose and slanted a smile at her. "Lieutenant Dallas," he said in that faint and fascinating Irish lilt, "a pleasure, as always." "You might not think so when I'm finished." He lifted a brow. "Why don't you come the rest of the way in and get started? Then we'll see." "Coffee?" "Don't try to distract me, Rourke." She walked closer. Then, to satisfy her curiosity, she took a brief turn around the room. It was as big as a heliport, with all the amenities of a first-class hotel: automated service bar, a padded relaxation chair complete with VR and mood settings, an oversized wall screen, currently blank. To the left, there was a full bath including whirl tub and drying tube. All the standard office equipment, of the highest high-tech, was built in. Rourke watched her with a bland expression. He admired the way she moved, the way those cool, quick eyes took in everything. "Would you like a tour, Eve?" "Number." "How do you work with all this?" Using both hands, she gestured widely at the treated glass walls. "Open." "I don't like being closed in." "Are you going to sit, or prowl?" "I'm going to stand." "I have some questions to ask you, Rourke." "You're entitled to have counsel present." "Am I under arrest?" "Not at the moment." "Then we'll save the lawyers until I am." "Ask." Though she kept her eyes level on his, she knew where his hands were, tucked casually in the pockets of his slacks. Hands revealed emotions. "Night before last," she said, "between the hours of 8 and 10 p.m. Can you verify your whereabouts?" "I believe I was here until shortly after 8. With a steady hand he touched his desk log. "I shut down my monitor at 8:17. I left the building, drove home." "Drove?" she interrupted. "Or were driven?" "Drove. I keep a car here. I don't believe in keeping my employees waiting on my whims." "Damned democratic of you." And, she thought, Damned inconvenient. She'd wanted him to have an alibi. And then, I poured myself a brandy, had a shower, changed. I had a late supper with a friend. How late? And what friend? I believe I arrived at about 10. I like to be prompt. At Madeleine Montmartre's townhouse. Eve had a quick vision of a curvy blonde with a sultry mouth and almond eyes. Madeleine Montmartre, the actress? Yes, I believe we had squab, if that's helpful. She ignored the sarcasm. No one can verify your movements between 8:17 and 10 p.m. One of the staff might have noticed, but then, I pay them well and they're likely to say what I tell them to say. His voice took on an edge. There's been another murder. Lola Starr, licensed companion. Certain details will be released to the media within the hour. And certain details will not. Do you own a silencer, Rourke? His expression didn't change. Several. You look exhausted, Eve. Have you been up all night? Goes with the job. Do you own a Swiss handgun, Sig 210? Circa 1980. I acquired one about 6 weeks ago. Sit down. Were you acquainted with Lola Starr? Reaching into her briefcase, she pulled out a photo she'd found in Lola's apartment. The pretty, elfin girl beamed out, full of sassy fun. Rourke lowered his gaze to it as it landed on his desk. His eyes flickered. This time his voice was tinged with something Eve thought sounded like pity. She isn't old enough to be licensed. She turned 18 4 months ago. Applied on her birthday. She didn't have time to change her mind, did she? His eyes lifted to Eve's. And yes, it was pity. I didn't know her. I don't use prostitutessa or children. He picked up the photo, skirted the desk, and offered it back to Eve. Sit down. Have you ever goddammit, sit down. In sudden fury, he took her shoulders, pushed her into a chair. Her case tipped, spilling out photos of Lola that had nothing to do with sassy fun. She might have reached them first. Her reflexes were as good as his. Perhaps she wanted him to see them. Perhaps she needed him to. Crouching, Rourke picked up a photo taken at the scene. He stared at it. Christ Jesus, he said softly. You believe I'm capable of this? My beliefs aren't the issue. Investigating as she broke off when his eyes whipped to hers. You believe I'm capable of this? He repeated in an undertone that cut like a blade. No, but I have a job to do. Your job sucks. She took the photos back, stored them. From time to time. How do you sleep at night, after looking at something like this? She flinched, though she recovered in a snap. He'd seen it. As intrigued as he was by her instinctive and emotional reaction, he was sorry he'd caused it. By knowing I'll take down the bastard who did it. Get out of my way. He stayed where he was, laid a hand on her rigid arm. A man in my position has to read people quickly and accurately, Eve. I'm reading you as someone close to the edge. I said, get out of my way. He rose, but shifting his grip on her arm, pulled her to her feet. He was still in her way. He'll do it again, Rourke said quietly. And it's eating at you wondering when and where and who. Don't analyze me. We've got a whole department of shrinks on the payroll for that. Why haven't you been to see one? You've been slipping through loopholes to avoid testing. Her eyes narrowed. He smiled, but there was no amusement in it. I have connections, Lieutenant. You were doing testing several days ago. Standard department procedure after a justifiable termination, one you executed the night Sharon was killed. Keep out of my business, she said furiously. And fuck your connections. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid they'll find if they get a look inside of that head of yours? That heart of yours? I'm not afraid of anything. She jerked her arm free, but he merely laid his hand on her cheek. A gesture so unexpected, so gentle. Her stomach quivered. Let me help you. Something nearly spilled out, as the photos had. But this time her reflexes kept it tucked away. I'm handling it. She turned away. You can pick up your property anytime after 9 a.m. tomorrow, Eve. She kept her eyes focused on the doorway, kept walking. What? I want to see you tonight. Number. He was very tempted to lunge after her. Instead, he stayed where he was. I can help you with the case. Cautious, she stopped, turned back. If he hadn't been experiencing an uncomfortable twist of sexual frustration, he might have laughed aloud at the combination of suspicion and derision in her eyes. How? I know people Sharon knew. As he spoke, He saw the derision alter to interest, but the suspicion remained. It doesn't take a long mental leap to realize you'll be looking for a connection between Sharon and the girl whose photos you're carrying. I'll see if I can find one. Information from a suspect doesn't carry much weight in an investigation, but, she added before he could speak, you can let me know. He smiled. After all, is it any wonder I want you naked, and in bed? I'll let you know, Lieutenant, and walked back behind his desk. In the meantime, get some sleep. When the door closed behind her, the smile went out of his eyes. For a long moment he sat in silence. Fingering the button he carried in his pocket, he engaged his private, secure line. He didn't want this call on his log,